What's up, everybody? I'm RadioActive, and you're watching Evan Potter. Or wait.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's Ian here with RadioActive Podcast, and Victoria and I are joined by the one, the only Evan Potter. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Evan, he is one of the lead guitar players in the rock and roll group Lilith Czar. Furthermore, he also does guitar work and guitar technician stuff and things and stuff with many traveling groups, one of which we all know as the mighty Atreyu.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me back.
We're very excited to have you back on today. It's been too long. We got to do it more often.
It has been too long. Yeah, we were just saying that maybe it's been like somewhere in the ballpark of a year since we talked last time, which seems insane that that's even possible, but here we are. Well, thanks for having me back again, guys. Been looking forward to chatting it up again.
Sure. I've been looking forward to meeting you, man.
Yeah, man. I think
remember...
we've chatted a bit back and forth online, but this is our first like proper hang.
Yeah. Your stage presence is, first of all, phenomenal. You and Justice were like eyeing each other. Okay, so I saw you in Chicago for the Trinity of Terror tour. Before that, I saw you in 2019 at Rockstar Disrupt Festival.
Oh wow! Oh, the rainy show.
Yeah, dude. Oh my God. Let me tell you, it made it so fun though.
Yes, I absolutely remember that show because I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska originally, and when I first got into touring and traveling, playing bigger shows, I was always so excited to get somewhere near Nebraska so that I could put the word out to friends and family and everybody like, we're playing here, come to the show. So St. Louis was the closest show that got to Nebraska. And I was telling my folks for weeks, like, all right, this is the one to come to. This is the one to come to. Now, St. Louis is a good 7 or 8 hour drive from Lincoln. So it was like not exactly a close hometown show, but so my folks both came out for that show, and the morning of, it was absolutely downpouring rain, and I was thinking that I was going to have to put out the call to my parents who were like 7 hours into the 8 hour drive, like, hey, thanks for coming, but it's going to get rained out tonight. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but it's crazy to hear that you were at that show as well.
Dude, yeah, man. That, I had that same feeling that your parents probably had along with yourself. My buddy Frank and so I picked him up about, 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and it was raining, and we kept looking at each other. We're driving down to Maryland Heights, and is that where it was? I think
you're right.
Yeah, Maryland Heights, because I always get.
I think you're right.
I'm like, where's the amphitheater? Because I mean, it's just a St. Louis, like, oh, Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. Where's that at? Like,
Yep. I think you're exactly right. As soon as you said that name, I was like, oh yeah, that is where it was.
We just kind of hoped for the best, and they were selling ponchos, and it was some dude running around. I kid you not, he just had his dogs out, and he was just running around selling ponchos, and I bought one, and this is where it gets funny. So you guys take the stage. You were second for the festival, if I remember.
Yep.
And you took the stage, and about halfway through the set, I don't remember what exactly was said. It was something about horses, of all things.
Mm-hmm.
And I just made a little like, nah, like a horse, right? And Lilith looked at me, pointing at me, and goes, "Nice poncho, dude."
Yeah, that sounds like a Lilith move for sure. For sure. That's great, man. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're at the show. And it's awesome that you're a part of this like podcast now. This is great.
I tell you what, man, your stage presence when you're up there rocking out with Justice and eyeing him down, and it's dude, the energy is there, Evan, for sure. And it's really cool to get to meet you, man. Really.
Well, thank you, buddy. Justice definitely keeps me on my toes in that regard. For anybody who has met Justice, you know that he is a wicked smart, very talented person in general, but some might say that he's a little bit more subdued or a little bit like I don't know, his stage presence doesn't exactly add up with what his day-to-day, presence is like. And so when that kid gets on stage and starts doing his thing, it's like, where did this guy come from, and how am I supposed to keep up with what's going on over here? So it's been a lot of fun having him as somebody who I can kind of like, feed off of his stage presence and his energy, because he's a freak of nature. It's so fun.
So you, as we had just mentioned, we talked about Atreyu briefly, and
Yep.
you just got back tour with them, and before Atreyu was the Black tour in Europe. Can you kind
Sure
of tell
was.
us a little bit about those shows? Like, what were some of your favorite memories? Like, what were you guys like most amped up for? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that run was incredible. It was 2 weeks as direct support for the Black Veil Brides in the United Kingdom, which was my first time being in the UK or in Europe in general. So was, right off the bat, incredibly excited about that opportunity. And of course, we've done a lot of work with the Black Veil Brides in the past and know those guys and the camp and everybody. And it was a fun opportunity to kind of like have a little reunion and to go explore somewhere I'd never been to before. And it was great. The crowds were fantastic. Everybody was very, very excited about the shows. And for me, it was a fantastic experience to get out of the United States for the first time as a person who's been born and raised here and spent very minimal time outside of the country thus far, aside from doing shows in Canada or doing shows in Mexico. It was an awesome chance to just get a perspective of what living somewhere else in the world was like, and in all sorts of different ways that came along with that. It was just a very interesting, eye-opening experience just to see kind of how perspectives, I don't know, go other places. It was awesome. A couple of my standout spots that I remember very well was one of them was Glasgow. We did a show there that was, if it wasn't sold out, it was dang close. And for whatever reason, that night and that crowd specifically was extra fired up. The energy was fantastic. I'm a huge bulldog lover, and walking into the venue that day, there was what I refer to as a shop dog who was at the venue that was a bulldog. So immediately, my night was set up for success. So that show in particular was fantastic. And then another one of my favorite memories was we played in Nottingham, and we ended up, I forget what happened. We either had the whole day to kind of like, we had free time before the show started, or we stayed in Nottingham the day before we were going to play there. So basically, Lindsay and I wound up with a whole afternoon to just go explore and kind of bounce around and get involved in whatever we could get involved in. And her and I tend to be the ones who like really enjoy doing that kind of thing. And excuse me, Justice and Kevin had been to the UK before, whereas Lindsay and I hadn't. So maybe it was a little bit more, enticing for us as people who had never experienced any of it before. But so her and I spent the day running around and going to check out, Nottingham Castle, and then we went and had like a beer at the oldest pub in the UK, and just it was very cool. A lot of bouncing around, a lot of really awesome sites. Talked to all sorts of cool people. It was a very memorable experience.
A lot of people when they tour in the UK, it's one of their favorite places to go. Like I know Lonnie had said when they went over there, he was super hyped to be there. There's a lot of cool stuff to see over there.
Yes, and it was fantastic to do another tour with Lonnie where he was in full health and wasn't breaking anything and had to leave early. So we got to spend the whole 2 weeks hanging out.
We had mentioned that you had went on tour with Atreyu to do some guitar tech work, and you've also done some work with the Struts as well, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. Yep.
So what do you enjoy most about doing guitar tech work and just being on the road with those bands?
So I just within the last couple of weeks hit about a year that I've been accepting tech work. It was never something that I had done prior to last year. I've always handled my own instruments in playing settings, whether it be doing setups or string changes, or if, I've always been hands-on with my stuff. So it was something that I was already kind of doing, but hadn't ever really entertained the idea of doing it for other people. And then as the universe works, I had a very random opportunity fall in my lap. Actually, after Lilith had done Welcome to Rockville, we were sitting in our hotel in the morning waiting to go to the airport to fly back home, and I got a call from a friend who was out on the tour that Atreyu was on at the time, and they had some issues with their guitar tech and a couple other people in their crew at the time. And this friend of mine who had, we had worked with on Trinity of Terror, kind of just told me that like this opportunity had come up and that he knew that I could do the task that needed to be done, even though I had never, accepted a proper guitar tech position before. And so he threw my name in, and 2 days later I was on a flight to like New Jersey, I think it was, to meet up with Atreyu to jump in mid-tour and just start teching for them. They didn't know that at the time. They know that now, that it was my first time ever doing that, but I decided to keep that on the hush hush for the time being. And so I can tell you for sure that what I love about doing that job with those guys specifically is that, number one, we've become basically like second family. I mean, the band guys, their family members, all of my, like, our crew, everybody who's involved in the Atreyu camp is just the best to be around, and we have a fantastic relationship. So it makes living together very fun and very easy. And touring around for weeks at a time on a vehicle with people isn't always the easiest thing to do. So any amount that you can enjoy the people who are around you, or enjoy the people that you're around more, just the easier it makes the job in general. But for anybody who's seen any of like the videos or stuff that I've posted while being out working with those guys, what they allow me to do during their set is completely preposterous. On this last run that we just did, it was a headlining tour for them, so they were playing somewhere around an hour and 15 minutes each night, and throughout the course of the night, there's 4 or 5 times that I got up on stage and danced with Porter, the bass player. For probably the second half of the tour, I was coming up and playing bass on one of the encore songs. Completely ridiculous that I would get to do that. And there's just all sorts of funny stuff that goes on. At one point, the guitar player was coming out and doing a saxophone solo that I was, holding a microphone for, and like just lots of funny antics and stuff like that, that I'm incredibly appreciative for. I mean, I'm sure you guys, and I know all sorts of people around the world did. I listened to Atreyu, when I remember being in high school and listening to Atreyu, and being a big fan, and to now fast forward and to think like that I started working for them, and that they've had me play during their set and come up and dance and just be ridiculous, is very, like, a very surreal thing, and something I'm very like fortunate and thankful for. I love those guys.
Mm-hmm. And if I'm not mistaken, on Trinity of Terror Part 3, when Atreyu had opened, were you guys not playing like Mario Kart or something on the big screen? Not
Yes.
a thing.
Yeah, that was a thing a couple of times for sure. Yeah, we are very good friends with basically the guys who are in charge of the lighting situation on that tour, and in a prank context a time or two, and then in just a casual context a time or two, there was definitely Mario Kart that was being played during the Atreyu set.
That's what makes those concerts so fun, though, is just the weird shit that goes on, the most random stuff that'll happen.
Man, Yeah, and I tell you what, there's so many people who I run into, who, like on Trinity, for example, that was a great um, way to showcase just this because they were on as the opener for that tour, and lots of people by the time they got there at the show that day either didn't know that Atreyu was opening the tour, or we get all the time like, oh my gosh, Atreyu, like I loved them back whenever Becoming the Bull, and these massive songs that they had back in the day. And what I love to see happen and to talk to people after the shows is that people who come to the show either never having seen Atreyu before or not even knowing that they were still you know playing live and making new music and all this stuff, they see the current iteration of the live show and they walk away going, what was that? Like, that was this is a metal show and there's people dancing and there's saxophones and there's like they're doing chants with Whitney Houston songs with people in the crowd. But it's a very fun, very genuine, alive thing to witness because those guys are comedians basically in their own right when they're off stage. And so watching their show, it's really like somewhere between a concert and an improv comedy show, sort of, because every single night the banter that goes on with people who are in the crowd is completely different. Things that they decide to riff off of that come up. Somebody yells something, something random, and they all kind of feed off of it and make little bits out of it. So for sure, along with putting on just a really, really solid, fantastic live musical performance, I really get the impression that people are coming and leaving, with a more fun, silly, interactive experience than they were maybe expecting out of a metal show.
So wait, when you say Mario Kart, do you mean like they would do? Oh gosh, how? So like that really big,
The
like
big
giant
screen that they had behind Black Veil, it was up on that.
Yeah.
fucking way? Are you
Yeah.
kidding me?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is
After
what?
after we wrap up our call today, I'll sift through my phone because I know that there's videos floating around of these guys playing their encore songs, and it's not like they pulled up a video that was recorded of people playing Mario Kart. It was like there's four guys at front of house holding controllers, looking up, like playing while the set's going on.
That is hilarious, dude. Oh my god, that's funny.
Well, I think because Evan, on your story that day, I think you posted during sound check you guys were playing Mario Kart. And then later that night, I was flipping through and you had on your story that you guys were actually playing during the show. And I was like, no
Yeah.
way. That is actually so funny.
That's so
Yes.
hilarious, dude. If we did that with Super Smash Brothers, I'd lose my
See?
mind.
See, it's a great idea. See, those things are also moments that I'm really fortunate for about just being involved in touring in general, is that you just run into like characters and the people who are involved in the touring music scene, especially because it's such, not only is the music industry such a hyper creative industry as it is, but also the uniqueness of the touring lifestyle. Like, you're not running into people who work at desk jobs, who are just very typical, like, people out and about. There's very big personalities. There's very hilarious personalities. There's very smart, interesting people to be around. And that's just one of tons of examples of, um, you know, people who are just great and make the experience very fun and very, there's a lot of things that go on throughout a day technically that can be stressful, or, these things X, 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 and X need to happen for this show to go on and for everyone to make their money and for people to have a good experience who are buying the concert tickets. It's great to have opportunities where, kind of the pressure's off, and it's it very much is able to be maintained a fun experience while being a work experience. Um, and I realize now that I didn't exactly answer your question, Victoria, so I'll try to do that quickly about job wise, like specifically what I enjoy about it. And I have learned that coming in to teching, as somebody who's played guitar for 18 years and has, been playing live forever and really loves the live experience. It's fun to kind of be able to take myself out of the main character role and to try to think for my guys being like the instrumentalists that I deal with, whether it be Atreyu or any of these other bands, to try to put myself in their mindset and think, all right, if this was my show and I had somebody helping me out, as a tech for my stuff, what kind of things would I want them to do so that I could completely have nothing going in my mind during the show except for playing the show, having fun, and being able to just be free without worrying, oh, is a string going to break? Is my wireless pack on the right frequency? Like, is everything plugged in properly? I really love to try to be as perceptive of those moments as I can. And even to real little detailed stuff. Like, I'll give you a quick example. I remember on this last run, we were doing a show, I think in Arizona maybe, and during the set, everybody has their stations where they have like their water or whatever, drinks and picks or whatever stuff that they need throughout the show. And each night we find out, or we choose a spot for the lead singer Brandon for his drinks to be. Well, this particular venue that we were at was a smaller venue and didn't have some of the accommodations that would otherwise come with like a bigger venue. So he ended up having his drinks on basically like a railing that was leading down some stairs on the stage. So we got into the song and I'm watching this like cup of water and another open container just like shaking from the base on this railing, and the lighting situation was right under it, and I just like I couldn't get it out of my mind. I kept thinking like, this is going to be a problem. I can't move on with the show unless it's not. So I was like looking around to try to find something to fashion together like a cup holder, and I saw a roll of gaff tape. So I thought, okay, grab the gaff tape roll, pulled off a couple of strips, set the tape roll on the railing, and taped it to the railing. So by the next time Brandon came over, his drinks were in a cup holder, and he was like, "Wait, what? Okay, I see what you did there. Like I get it." So even doing that little stuff, even though like me and Brandon are the only people who are ever going to see that, knowing that it's another small thing that was able to get checked off the list so that Brandon or myself or anybody else doesn't even have to think about it. Just show goes on, have as much fun as possible, be able to give the best show as possible. It's a very rewarding feeling.
With all that being said, so it's so far it's been Atreyu, but we know that you work with a lot of different bands or artists. Who is a band or artist that you have worked with, whether it be filling in for a guitar spot or maybe you're doing tech work for? Who is a specific group that when you say them, people might be like, oh, whoa, that's kind of a curveball I wasn't really expecting, but that's cool. What was that like? You know what I mean?
Sure. I kind of get that in general when I tell people that I do guitar teching, because everybody has known me forever as a guitar player. But honestly, a lot of times when I tell people that I tech with Atreyu, often it's the response of like, no way, let's do Atreyu, man, lead sales. And I listened to that when I was in high school, and I would see him at Ozfest and Warped Tour. That happens quite often. I'm about to head out for a few months this year to work with the Struts in my first like long form tours with them. I've done a few shows with them here and there, but these will be the first couple of full length tours. So people are definitely interested and curious about that, because of course, while it's in the same like rock realm of music. They're definitely more of like a rock and roll band as opposed to, you know, something like Atreyu or something like Lilith that kind of operates more in like the metal community, I guess. Um, and then like the Warning, for example, you know, I did some tech work with them, and um, anybody who knows the Warning is always super excited to hear that, you know, I have anything to do with, you know, working with them. And for anybody who isn't aware of the Warning, when we have that conversation, that band and that group of people, I feel like is never going to not be interesting for somebody to hear about for the first time. You know, like when you say, yeah, I've worked with this really awesome band, The Warning. They're, you know, it's a very family oriented thing. It's these three young sisters from Mexico who do rock music. You know, that in itself is like, oh, okay, that's kind of like out of the ordinary. So yeah, it's definitely allotted me tons of opportunities to meet lots of people that I wouldn't have otherwise crossed paths with, at least as early as I did. Make tons of great relationships, learn a bunch of stuff. I mean, I've learned a ridiculous amount of information and lessons and little tips and tricks and stuff over the last year of doing quite a bit of tech work. So it's something I'm very fortunate about for sure.
For me, when I found out that you were doing a little bit of work with the Struts, that was like, oh, holy crap, like that's really cool.
Yeah, me too.
Struts and the Warning. So the Warning is a group of 3 women.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're sick, dude. You gotta go check them out.
I'm gonna have to check them out. Look, I love that. And I feel like more often than not, this doesn't happen, but I love it when you have a strong female lead singer, especially if she does like harsh vocals, like Maria Brink from In This Moment. Oh my God, dude, it hits different. It hits different. It's like, whoa, this is pretty badass.
Man, I was super lucky last year. The first time that the Warning got on my radar was because Lilith was got booked to do a tour last summer with, it was Lilith, the Warning, the Pretty Reckless, and Hailstorm.
Yes.
And I had known that this was coming up for a little while, and so actually when I was out on my first run with Atreyu about a year ago at this time, this had kind of been put on my radar that we were going to be on tour with them, and so eventually I was hearing like amazing things about them, right? And at the time, all I knew was that they were 3 sisters from Mexico and that they were like in this really awesome rock band. So one night I had gotten into my bunk after doing a show with Atreyu, and I thought, okay, well now's as good a time as ever. Might as well like check the Warning out. And I just pulled up some full length live show, and right off the bat of the beginning of their set, I was like, what is this? And who are these girls? So I was really excited to see their live show by the time that we were on that tour. And they completely exceeded all expectations that I had going into it. I mean, those girls are no joke whatsoever. Incredible musicians, the sweetest people that you could run into. And like I said, it's like a family run business. Their folks are out there on the road with them. And they're just like absolutely delightful people. Their camp is great. The crew that they work with is fantastic. So yeah, working with them was a blast because it was just fun. But I also got to brush up on a bunch of Spanish during the time, so it doesn't hurt.
Speaking of kind of different bands and different genres of music a little bit, who is a band or artist that people would be surprised to learn that you listen to?
I know exactly who this would be. So believe it or not, Ed Sheeran is one of my favorite songwriters of all time. Big fan of acoustic singer-songwriter kind of music. And so yeah, he's probably my artist that like somebody else would consider a guilty pleasure. I'm not guilty about it. I think he's great, and I think that there's plenty of evidence to point towards that. But But yeah, Ed Sheeran would be one on the top of my list. I'll give you another honorable mention. The album called Cleopatra by the Lumineers is one of my favorite albums of all time, hands down. This is one that Lindsay specifically gives me endless amounts of shit for. But I don't care because it's fantastic.
The Lumineers are excellent. I support that
There.
100%. They're awesome.
Cool. Yeah, they're cool.
It took me years to finally do the dive because I knew like Ho Hey or whatever that song was called. But I was always kind of under the impression that they were like a lame band to listen to and that like I'm not supposed to be into them. And then I've accidentally through Spotify playlists or whatever heard a couple songs from that record, and yeah, that level of stripped down, very quote unquote basic songwriting where it's just a couple of instruments, a voice, great lyrics, great melody. That's totally up my alley. I love stuff like that. Lizzie McAlpine is another artist in that sort of realm that comes to mind for me. It's about as far away from metal music as you're gonna get. But yeah, I think it's great. I listen to a lot of music like that. I listen to a lot of pop music. Yeah, there's probably a decent amount of stuff that I listen to that's sort of unexpected.
I kind of
Yes,
want
sir.
to piggyback off of Victoria and go off script here. We've had on a couple of guests. Chevy Marie, I don't know if you know who that is. Do you?
I do. I love Chevy.
We had her on. We had on Chris Biersack, Andy's dad, and
Oh, cool.
they kind of mentioned like I can't really get down to for Chevy. It was country. Chris doesn't really listen to rap. He doesn't really like it. So with that being said, is there a specific genre? Because not everybody's going to be into everything. Is there any specific genre of music that you can't really get into it?
Yeah. I would say that right now in my life, a couple of genres that don't typically elicit any or much like response from me, I feel like is a decent way to put it. Lots of modern rap and hip hop don't really grasp me. Now there's like I still go back and listen to a lot of rap and hip hop that I used to listen to when I was in high school, because at that time those genres of music were like my most predominantly listened to. But yeah, typically nowadays, more of like the club rap, mumble rap kind of stuff, usually doesn't grasp my attention. Um, and this one's contextual often, but lots of times, lots of kinds of jazz don't don't strike don't strike my ear at least. Now I have huge amounts of appreciation for the process of participating in jazz music and the people who kind of have the mindset for it and the improvisational abilities for it. I find that watching jazz music is very interesting, like watching people perform it. But there's not too many occasions where, if I'm out and about somewhere and it's, smooth jazz music that's playing, I have less times where my ears perk up and go, wait, what is that? Like, what is this song? I need to look this up and remember what that is. Now, having said that, typically I like gypsy jazz sounding music. So kind of the 20s, like roaring 20s sort of version of like flapper dancing, jazz music. That stuff has always been pretty interesting to me. There's oh my gosh, what is this? Caravan Palace. There's a band called Caravan Palace that's from France that does, best way I can describe it is like a mix between 20s era like gypsy jazz and almost like modern electronic music that is great. So yeah, when it comes to liking or disliking genres as a whole, lots of times it's more like context based for me. But typically nowadays, I would say that lots of kinds of smooth jazz, and lots of modern rap and hip hop don't tend to like register on my scale too much these days.
You're on the road a lot. As a
Correct.
musician, you are on the road a lot, a tremendous amount. And do you live in an apartment or a condo? Did you buy a house?
So I actually just within the last month or 6 weeks moved from an apartment in LA to a house in Nashville. I'm officially a
Los
Nashville
Angeles,
resident.
California to Nashville, Tennessee?
That's correct. I did not buy a house in Nashville, but I now live I have one roommate. I live in this house in Nashville.
Dude, that's sick.
Yeah. Yeah, very excited about it. This has been a while in the works and I've finally made it happen.
So, that being said, do you mind if I ask like what some of the mechanics are in terms of like how you get paid and you're able to pay bills, put food on the table, stuff like that? What's the currency like in that aspect of being a traveling musician?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. So everything that I've done in the last few years that I've gotten heavily involved in touring have pretty much all been under what you could consider like the hired gun mode of operating. That means that whether I'm playing with Lilith, um, or whether I'm going out to work with Atreyu or going out to work with the Struts, it's all you could think about it as basically like subcontractor work. Um, so basically, what happens is prior to a tour happening, you have a conversation with the management of whoever it is that you're going to be working with, or whoever in the project is kind of like at the helm of dedicating the logistics. Um, you basically get presented with a time frame of what a tour is going to look like, and then from there you kind of figure out with management or whoever it is, like a weekly rate that you feel like you can go for and that you could make throughout the course of the time that you're out, and cover those things like bills and rent and things like that. Um, and so along with your weekly rate, there's also what's called per diems, which you get every day, which is a designated amount of money outside of your weekly rate that goes specifically towards food. So lots of times per diems will be $20 a day or $25 a day or whatever. So let's say you're going out for, we'll just keep it around $1,000 a week, and you're getting like that's your weekly rate. With per diems as well, if you have a $20 a day per diem, that means you're also getting an additional $140 every week that in theory is designated just for food budget. So because most of this work is in a subcontractor kind of context and not as if you were an employee with someone and you have, benefits or you get this and that are tied in with your weekly pay, it's kind of on you as the subcontractor to choose numbers as far as weekly rates are concerned, where, as the breakdown goes with it throughout your year, that you can have all your expenses paid and have rent paid. That also makes it a little bit more difficult because lots of times tours are on a 4 week, 6 week, 8 week stretch. So if you're lucky enough that your phone is ringing all the time and you can have, your year pretty consistently booked up and be able to look ahead and say, okay, I'm going to go do this 6 weeks with this group doing this. Then I'll be out for 4 weeks with this group doing this. You can kind of track and plan financially for what your year is going to look like. Now, if it's a little bit more sporadic, it gets a little bit trickier because, you might get a great rate going out with somebody for 2 weeks. So you make $2,000 a week for 6 weeks with a band. That's great. well, if you know that you're going to be getting back from that tour and not going out again with somebody for 2 months, you kind of have to plan on, you have to plan ahead so that you know that you can stretch whatever you're going to be making when you're making it to cover you for, the better part of the year. And I certainly am not any sort of expert or professional in getting that process nailed down perfectly yet. But I've been fortunate enough that I've been called for enough things that things have been staying pretty consistent. And so I'm working all the time to be better and better financially, as I'm sure everybody who's in our phase of being young to medium-sized adults are doing.
Interesting.
So these are just absolutely absurd. They have nothing to do with anything we've been talking about. But
Okay, amazing.
Something fun to close out the interview. So
I have a palate cleanser.
This first one. If animals could talk, which animal do you think would be the rudest? And why do you think that?
Oof. Which animal do I think would be the rudest?
Yes.
This really isn't fair, and it's pretty judgmental because there's not a lot of basis behind this, but I kind of feel like squirrels. I feel like squirrels would harbor some serious attitude, and I don't know why that is. I'm sure there's plenty of like lovely squirrels out there. But yeah, at least right off the top of the head, that's my guess. I'm always very unsure of what they're about to do, and that makes me questionable.
That's fair. I was gonna say like an alligator or something. That was gonna be my guess. Pretty rude.
Probably, yep, probably could be as well.
I'd probably say, and I'm sorry if Nicole Perkins sees this. Nicole's a friend of ours.
Mhm.
But I feel like a hairless cat would be the rudest animal.
Okay, but they would always be on edge for being judged because they look ugly. So they're on edge all the time.
So maybe there's a reasoning for it.
Yeah. Maybe.
That's true. Now I almost for a second was gonna say like whatever the grumpy cats are, is that one might be kind of rude. But yeah, I feel you on the hairless cat. I'm gonna stick with squirrel, but I think that these are all great answers as well.
If you could start a band with 4 musicians that have passed away, who would you choose? And they can be in any music genre.
Whoa. 4 musicians who have passed away. All right, so 2 right away, super easy. Dimebag Darrell and Tupac.
Nice.
A couple heavy hitters that must be involved. Whoa. Let's throw Bon Scott in there. Yep, that's a must-have. We're gonna need a vocalist anyways. Man, this last one's tough. What do I got? Dimebag, Tupac, Bon Scott. Need John Bonham. There we go. I was gonna say we need a drummer. Somebody to hold that down. Yeah. Dimebag Darrell, Tupac, Bon Scott, John Bonham, and me. Not exactly sure who all would be doing what, but tell me that something interesting wouldn't come out of that.
Oh, 100%.
That's my super group.
What would you name this band?
Oh, man. Spare parts. It would be spare parts. But if you don't mind, I have a tiny side story that I'll throw onto that, because there was a rehearsal studio that I worked at in LA on and off for about 4 years while I was there. And there was another guy who was working there whose name was Evan, and he was a drummer. And so we got to talking one day about how we needed to find a bass player named Evan and start a group of all Evan musicians. And of course, immediately the discussion came up of like what we were going to name it. And I feel pretty good about this name. And I think we're going to be called Stairway to Evan.
Oh my God, that's excellent. That would be amazing.
So it'll be the 3 of us. Everyone's named Evan. And maybe we'll even have like little little tiny staircases that lead up to us or something.
That would be
We're still working out the details, but the bones are there.
I think they are.
Yeah. So spare parts for the new supergroup. Stairway to Evan for my side project.
I remember when I first started playing guitar. Well, I was like a few years in, probably like 3 years into playing, and I was looking for other musicians to play with, and I'd said something about how I had a jam space to one of my friends, and I was like, oh, and I got like a chair in there, like it's kind of cool. And they're like, oh, a chair. We can be called Chairosmith.
Hey, yes. I live for stuff like that.
Chairosmith. So funny.
So good.
So, Evan, let's say, hypothetically speaking, you're stuck in a haunted house for one night alone. The entire night, there is a dead celebrity chasing you around the house. Who do you want chasing you and why?
This is a weird response. Does a celebrity have to be dead now, or could I hypothetically make this celebrity dead so that they would be the one who is chasing me around?
I'll allow it.
All right. If that's the case, then I would pick Margot Robbie, who of course is not dead currently, but for the sake of this discussion, we'll pretend like she is. Because in all transparency, whether that woman was alive or dead, I would love nothing more than for her to chase me around a house for however long she would want to.
Does she have to be dressed up like Harley Quinn or
whatever? At that point, not concerned anymore.
Not concerned.
Yeah, that would be my choice. Yep. I'm gonna do a second answer here because this person actually is currently dead, and there's a different reason for this one. But if either of you are familiar with the psychologist Carl Jung,
I've heard
this
of him.
guy. This guy is who developed like the concepts of like introverted versus extroverted, and like the concepts of the shadow and all these different like very intense psychological things that I find very interesting. I would choose him as well, because even though he'd be chasing me around, I would be like running away, but constantly like looking backwards and trying to yell like questions and pick his brain about different things while it was going on. So in the event that he would respond to any of those questions, I think that would still be a net gain in getting to talk to him, even though he's a zombie chasing me around. So two wildly different answers for wildly different reasons, but yeah, there's a couple that come to mind.
Well, I think that wraps everything up, Victoria, wouldn't you say?
Yes, it does. This was a lot of fun, Evan. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, this was a lot of fun. Thank you guys for having me back.